Luxury eatery manager kicks out an old man who seemed like a tramp, not knowing who he really is. Hi everyone, welcome to the Storyist. Sometimes we focus too much on worldly things that we forget about what is really important. Today, I will be telling you a story about a luxury eatery manager who kicked out an old man looking like a tramp from his restaurant. Little did he know, the man isn't actually who he thought he was. Stay until the end of the video to find out who the poor-looking man is and why the restaurant manager lived his life in regret. George worked so hard during his college days just to earn enough for his school fees. He worked as a waiter, a busboy, a janitor, and all else he could think of just to get by. So now that he's a manager at a luxury restaurant, he cannot stop bragging about it to almost every person he meets. He keeps telling them how hardworking he was before and how that led him to his success today. Often, he will forbid his staff from going on vacation leaves because he wants them to be as hardworking as him when he was young. Hard work is the only key to success. Nothing more and nothing less, he keeps telling his restaurant servers. He loves overworking his staff and releasing late payments to encourage them to work even harder. Sasha, one of his staff, does not agree with his virtue. Sasha believes that there is more to success than overworking. George worked as a staff in the restaurant for 8 years before he recently acquired the position of manager. Interestingly enough, the day he became the manager was also the day their restaurant's name changed from Berkeley's into Antonio's. They are aware that the ownership has changed, and even though they haven't met the new owner yet, George is determined to impress him no matter what. The restaurant ran smoothly and well for a short time under George's supervision, until one day, everything changed for George as an old man, clothed like a tramp, enters the luxury restaurant. The poor old man was wearing a plain gray sweaty t-shirt with dirty jogging pants. He also didn't have any bag with him, and he seems extremely parched. Sweat is covering his whole body, and everyone in the restaurant is looking at him with disgust as he enters the restaurant door. Sasha is quick to assist him, ignoring the poor man's state. Welcoming him from the restaurant's entrance, she ushers him to a nice spot of silk-covered table and chairs. Her act of kindness enrages George, and he immediately dismisses the poor man. He fears the silk tablecloth might get stained by the poor man's dirty hands, so he promptly shooed him away. "But he is very thirsty," argues Sasha. George ignores her plea and continues pushing the man away. The poor man just bows down his head in apology for barging into the restaurant. "May I please have a glass of water?" the poor man asked. Sasha quickly walks over to the counter to get him a glass of cold water. George confronts the man again, asking him to leave. Yet the man just keeps sitting on the spot Sasha gave him, and does not say any more words. The heat of the situation is starting to earn some audience, and the poor man is starting to feel ashamed. When Sasha walks back to him, she is holding a copy of the restaurant's menu. This enrages George even more, and right after the man gets hold of the menu, George harshly grabs it away. "What are you doing? This beggar can't even afford that water!" George yells at Sasha, pointing his finger between the poor man's eyes. Sasha feels bad about how her manager treats the customer, so she apologizes to the poor man. Hearing her apology, George gets more infuriated, leading him to fire Sasha. Sasha pleads to him, saying she was just helping the poor man. But George rolls his eyes at her. "Helping won't lead you to success, Sasha. Working will," he replies. Sasha cries in shock, apologizes to the manager, but George has a heart of stone and does not heed any of her pleas. My mother taught me to be kind always without asking anything in return," she says in between sobs. George ignores her and turns to the poor man. He orders him to leave once again or he'll call security. The poor man stands up, but before he can walk away, he calls him filthy and unworthy to step inside the restaurant. Hearing this, the poor man turns around and faces him. His face is filled with regret. He feels sorry for not stepping out when he was told to. He regrets watching a good staff member get fired because of him. But what's painted in his face is more of disappointment. He is disappointed with how the manager has turned out to be. The poor man takes out a leather wallet from his back pocket. George gets confused about this move, but he watches and waits to see what the poor man will do. When the man opened his wallet, a huge sum of cash and cards were inside. George's eyes widen and he glares at the poor man. "Where did you get that money?" he asked harshly. The poor man answers by showing George the other side of his wallet. He shows him his ID, which says, Richard Antonio. George's eyes widen once again, but this time in utter shock. He cannot believe what he's seeing, and he does not know what to say. He just stands there dumbfounded with all the other staff and guests. "I am Richard Antonio, the owner of this restaurant, and I am deeply disappointed by how you judged me by my look," the poor man says while tucking his wallet back in his pocket. Before leaving the restaurant, Richard turns to Sasha and smiles at her. "What your mother taught you is true. Always be kind without asking for anything in return," he tells Sasha. Then he turns to George and tells him he was like him before, a poor student who worked every job he could get just to get by. But their only difference is that he chose to be kind, always. Richard leaves the restaurant and every witness in awe. Just a day after the incident, George receives a letter from Richard, removing him from his job at the restaurant. This devastates him and leaves him with nothing. Turns out, Richard is actually a powerful man who runs plenty of business firms. He just happened to wear dirty and sweaty clothes because he was running a marathon for his daughter's school event and decided to refresh in one of his restaurants. But he got very disappointed learning how his manager treats people. George had a hard time looking for a job. He went back to being a waiter, a busboy, a janitor. One day, while he was on his way home from a cheap eatery he is working for, he comes across Antonio's. He peeks from the window and sees the same staff he had before. But this time, there are genuine smiles on their faces. They look a lot happier with their new manager now. And they look more inspired to do more work, not for their own gain, but for the restaurant they are working for. Then a familiar voice greets him from behind. George turns around and sees Sasha, standing beautifully in her managerial uniform. Richard gave Sasha the position of manager after she got fired, and now the restaurant runs smoother than ever. "Congratulations on your new job." Sasha smiles at him and taps his shoulder. "Just a piece of advice. Success doesn't only come to those who work hard. It comes to those who work, who care, and show compassion to others," she replies and walks toward the restaurant. Before entering, she looks back at George and calls him out. "If you want to go back, you're always welcome," Sasha concludes their conversation and enters the restaurant. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that story. Remember to be kind always, and we'll see you in the next video.